Hi, I'm Jamie Kudla, president of Tarrytech Computer Consultants. Thank you for joining me for my podcast, Better, Faster, Stronger, where we help move New York Metro businesses forward with tips on motivation, leadership, management, and innovation. Joining us this week is Christina Armentano. Christina is the executive vice president of Paraco Gas in Rye Brook, New York. Thank you for joining us, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
I can't believe it's January 14th already. It seems like it was, just the end of the year, and I'm kind of winding things down and doing business planning for 2021. And I was fortunate. I had some time out of the office between Christmas and New Year's, and it seems like it was about a year ago. It's already January 14th. I mean, we're taking off. We're moving forward quickly. How about you?
Same thing. Time is just flying by. But as they say, time flies by when you're having fun.
That's right.
But there's been, the environment has been very interesting lately. So I think it's keeping us folks here at Paraco incredibly busy. So we've been busy, and it's been going by pretty fast.
Yeah, we're kind of in an interesting spot. I think, certainly from a COVID landscape standpoint, last year at this time, or in March timeframe, things were really locked down. We went through the summer. I think things opened up a little bit in the summer because people could go outside and that kind of thing. But then going back to the business in the fall and people going back to school and that kind of thing, we kind of had to navigate our way through that. So the fall was a little bit different than the summer and the spring. But here we are. We're, hopefully some good news with the vaccine being released and, them getting it out to the people and the effectiveness of the vaccine. So just when you feel like you adapted to how the landscape is going to be, they're changing it again. But I'll take this good news anytime.
Absolutely, us as well. And for our company with the COVID environment, it's been an interesting couple months for us as an organization. Even our demand and usage has changed dramatically. Typically, as you can imagine, with the propane company, we're incredibly busy during the winter season, but shockingly enough, we're still delivering pool gallons. Folks still have their pools open because they're staying home, they're hunkering down. People are still grilling. You could see what they're doing with restaurants, with patio heaters.
Sure.
So for us, it's been, we talk about time going by fast and we talk about demand changes. This is something that's been very unique to our business too, that we've had to pivot and change, but feel pretty blessed to be within an industry that is seeing a increase in customer experience during this time.
When I think of propane and bottled gas and that kind of thing, I think of Paraco. So your name really is, as far as I'm concerned, is synonymous with that industry. So I'm not surprised to hear that you guys are doing so well, because I'm sure you have a big client base. So this is the first podcast of 2021. So welcome. I'm going to ask you a couple questions. I want to find out a little bit about you first and the business and that kind of thing, and then we'll get into the format of the podcast where we actually ask questions: what's made you better? What's made you faster? What's made you stronger? So let's get right into it. Tell me a little bit about your business and what do you guys do, and give us some information about that.
Sure. So we have been around since 1968. My grandfather, Pat Armentano, started the company out of a garage in Mount Vernon, New York. So right down the street from where our corporate office is. We were originally in the industrial gas business and then got into propane in 1979 with our first acquisition of a company called Paraco Gas. So that's where the name originally came from, and it's stuck since then.
What was the original company name?
Patsons.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And the first acquisition was Paraco.
Correct.
Oh, interesting.
Correct. And so, during our time frame, really from 1979 to now, we've been growing through acquisitions. We've done 52 acquisitions to date. And so we are specifically a propane marketer. And what that means is we provide propane for, as you mentioned, the barbecue exchange, for home heating, cooking, commercial heating. We also even do some agricultural business as well. So there are many different uses and applications for propane, which we handle. We service 8 different states, 120,000 customers, and with 400 employees out of 28 distribution locations.
Wow. How many times have you given that summary? Because you did that pretty quickly. You weren't even
I,
making notes.
Yeah, I probably at least once a week, Jamie. So it's kind of like memorized here. Now we just went through a recent acquisition at the end of December, so our 27 locations just got moved up to 28.
Wow, fantastic. And you guys are, how many states did you say it was?
We're in 8 different states.
And is that
So,
Northeast?
yep, primarily Northeast. And as we look to expand, potentially getting into the Southeast and also moving out west. But that's really
Eventually the
been
world.
our core.
Eventually
Where?
taking over the world.
Oh, of course, one market at a time. But for us, our strategy has always been when we look at growth, how do we be as strong as we possibly can and successful in our core market area, and making sure not to take over too much that we can't handle or transition it, and growing in our core area of competency and moving from there.
Interesting. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your background, and how you got started, and then how you moved into Paraco, or maybe you started directly with Paraco. Actually, spoiler alert, you gave me some of the answers, so I know that you didn't, but I'll let you talk about it.
So I'll give a brief history. So as I mentioned, my grandfather started the business. My father, Joseph Armentano, has been running the company as CEO since 1988. And really, my grandfather and my father approached me right after college to get into the business. I'd always done, work, answering the phones, opening mail, everything I could possibly imagine since probably the age of 4 years old with the company.
Yeah, of
So I
course.
was always, I think at one point in time when I was like, I was able to walk, but I was the donut person, right? I would bring the donuts up and around when I would go to the office on Saturdays and Sundays, down when we still had our office down in Mount Vernon. So, I was approached several times to come and join the company, but what was really important to me was to create my own career path first before joining the family business, and really understanding my own skill set and what I needed to work on. So I actually had a career for almost 10 years out of Paraco prior to joining.
That's significant.
It's pretty significant, if you ask my father, he'll say, I think it was 5 years, or I think it was 7. I'm like, no, it was almost 10.
Yeah.
And he'll joke, about his sales skills to get me on board. But, it had to be the right time, and it had to be the right fit. So
Yep.
I spent the early part of my career working for a executive search firm, basically placing folks within financial services. I worked in New York City and really had more of a recruitment role. Then I moved into business development role, and loved that line of work, and the skills that I needed seemed to be a very good match. I then went back to get my MBA. I wanted to round out the financial knowledge and build some of those financial muscles, and worked then for a company called Vistaprint, the
Oh,
business
sure.
card company,
Yeah, of course.
and great experience with them, and worked within their North American recruitment arm. And then I got approached by my father to come on board. And this time it was for a role to be working within what we're calling our human capital management. So HR, but really looking at it more from a metrics perspective. And I said, wow, that could be a good fit. And he said, I'm going to need you to be on the road. I'm going to need you to visit locations. I need you to understand the employees. And I said, you know what? I think that's a good fit. And I think I could add some value. So that was in 2014. And that's when I originally started with the company. And since then, I've held several different positions with the organization. And as you mentioned, now I'm the executive vice president. I handle our sales, marketing, customer experience, as well as acquisitions.
Customer experience and acquisitions.
Yes, as well
And
as marketing as well, and sales.
before we get into, and I'm going to ask you some questions, but that's a lot. Sales, marketing, customer experience, and acquisitions. How do you divide your day? Like, how do you find yourself effective in all of those? And I know that you are. I mean, obviously, Paraco is doing so well, and you're growing, and there's such a big name. So how do you do all of that? Because that sounds like a lot. It sounds like you would need 4 people for that.
Well, the good news is I have a great team. And I know that's always the easy response, but I really have a phenomenal team of leaders that are heading up each one of those departments, many who have been with the organization for a significant period of time. Example, our director of sales, he's been with Paraco for over 16 years. And this year is actually his first year in this new role. Our director of customer experience, again, another long-term employee. So for me, dividing up my day, it changes, day to day, week to week, but really understanding what those priorities are and trying to focus on them as much as possible. The other thing is we really have worked incredibly hard to create a solid foundation for our team. And what we call our SMAC team, which is sales, customer experience, acquisitions, and what's my last one? That's sales, marketing, acquisitions, and customer experience. That group works very, very tightly together. And that also helps tremendously to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. We're working with each other to get projects done. And that has helped set us up for success within that specific group.
I love the acronym SMAC. That's perfect. I bet you use it all the time.
Oh, use it all the time. It's our snack meeting. When we had Thanksgiving, we did talking smack about turkey. Yes, so we it's a play on words, but it helps lift the morale, I think, of the team. It excites them. It's something we like to use.
Right, they're part of something. They have an identity in the company that's helping move forward. Can you talk a little bit about planning? Because I got to believe that, managing that many teams and having that strong of a leadership and a hallmark of all great companies and leaders is that they do a lot of business planning and goal setting and that kind of thing. Is that something that you bring to, do you do something at the end of the year? How often do you meet with your teams and how do you share that plan? Because you can't, obviously you're not doing all of this stuff. So how do you share that information and then make sure that they're moving forward with those initiatives?
Yep. So I live and die by my calendar. Okay. So I like to have everything as well organized in advance as possible. With that group that I just described, our SMAC team, we have a bi-weekly meeting. And what we actually have started to do, at first I was leading the meetings. Now what we do is on a rotational basis, each one of the leaders run their own meeting. So what's important to them? What do they think is important to the group? And we have seen that pay off tremendously because now you're seeing folks feel empowered and really be able to put their agenda on this meeting. I meet with my direct reports also individually on a bi-weekly basis. We do a one-on-one, but I'm in constant communication with them. If something comes up or if they need me, I'm a text, I'm a phone call away. So that's kind of the day-to-day. When it comes to the overall strategic planning, we do put together on an annual basis what is our strategic plan, and it's right around the time that we're doing budgets. So we're about to embark on that process again. Our year end is July 31st. So we start budget discussions in February and start really getting into the numbers in April. But it's important for our teams to understand not only here's the budget that you're going to develop, and we give them, again, empower them to put those budgets together and put their budget recommendations, but what is the strategic plan behind that budget that they put forward? And then reviewing it as we go forward, really on a quarterly basis for all parties that need to be involved.
That's great. I mean, carving up the budget like that and giving them to the departments, I think it empowers all of your managers, team leads to run their department like a business in and of itself. So yes. That's very powerful. So keeping in the format of the podcast, obviously you guys have a ton of information to share. So we're going to talk about a few things, what has made you better, what has made you faster, what have made you stronger. What can you share with my listeners, things that they can do in their own business to help them move forward and be as successful as you and your company. So the first question will be, describe something that's made your company better.
So when I look at better, I always go right to our employees. And again, being a organization that has been around for 50 plus years, there's always been a consistent culture that we've been able to hold on to and also continue to develop. And it comes down to our employees' willingness to go above and beyond when they're in need. And I think making sure as an owner of this organization that we are showing our appreciation for what they're doing on a continuous basis, not just at the end of the year when it's bonuses, but really highlighting their achievements, what they've accomplished, and focusing on that employee base has helped to strengthen and make us a stronger company overall.
So that's amazing when you invest in, your team like that, right? And you said something, they go above and beyond. I mean, you can't put a price on that, right? I mean, to have somebody that's going to do that for the company, I got to believe you have people that have been there for decades. What's the longest term employee that you have?
I believe it is, so for a full-time employee, 34 years.
That's insane.
It's a gentleman who's part of our sales organization. He is phenomenal. And then we do have another gentleman, he's part-time, and now he's part-time, but man, I bet it's over 40 years. I mean, he's been with us for a very long period of time.
I mean, that speaks volumes about the company that you guys are and the management and, how you work with your team. But you made mention of, you go through, you appreciate them and, you're showing them how appreciated they are and what they mean to the company. Could you talk about that a little bit more? Like, what does that look like on a, I don't know, daily basis or monthly basis?
So I've always been a big believer that employees, and we all want recognition, right? We all want someone to say you've done a good job. And I think it is very easy when you're in a management position to be looking sometimes through the lens of what should this employee be doing better? What hasn't this employee done right? Versus the let's really focus on the praise of what they've done correctly. We do some things like an employee newsletter that goes out on a monthly basis that highlights 2 of our employees on a rotational basis, who they are, what they've done, what their accomplishments are. Another thing that we do is we do an internal lead program to develop sales opportunities, and we reward financially those folks that bring in these leads. So drivers or service techs, yard personnel, customer service, somebody who's outside of the sales realm. And not only do we financially compensate them for doing this, but we celebrate them, right? So whether it's at a safety meeting, calling out, Joe Smith, hey, do you know what he did? This is wonderful. Another thing I can highlight, we do Listen 360 for some folks. That's also called Net Promoter Score. And those are the surveys that are going out to our customers asking how we've performed. What I love, and I look at them daily because I get an email that comes through and it'll sometimes mention a specific employee. And if it doesn't, I'll go to see who it is. And then we'll reach out directly to that employee. Hey, great job. Did you see this customer said this about you? And then we celebrate it, right? So those are just some of the tangible things that we've put into play that have, I think, made a big difference and also showcase that appreciation.
Great ideas. I mean, you said that it's the culture and the mindset, and it's one thing to say it, but I mean, if I gave you 10 more minutes, you could probably keep going on, but I mean, some really good ideas there. And in fact, I'm going to steal your idea about the employee newsletter. What a great idea. It's kind of cool. I mean, is it something that you do digitally or do you actually print it out and send it out, or?
We do it digital. Originally, as you can imagine, and we've had this for years, it was a hard copy, right? But now it's completely digital, goes out to all of the employees. And we also put it on our payroll landing page. So when people can go in, they can go into that app, they can see it as well.
I love it. What a great idea. I'm going to steal that one.
Oh, absolutely. You should.
Fantastic. Moving on. So that's better. Can we talk? Oh, you know what? I got another question before we move off of that. So in your industry, I got to believe there's a lot of training from certainly from a safety standpoint, from an environmental standpoint. Could you talk about that? Because if you have employees that are staying with you for that long, they're contributing that much to your team, you have to be investing in them professionally. And in your industry, what does that look like?
Yep. No, very good question. So I know I'm somewhat biased, but I do think we have one of the best, if not the best, director of safeties for our industry at our company. A gentleman named Dave Latterell. He has been with us for many years, and he and his team have been incredibly dedicated to the training of our, what I would call our frontline employees. What somewhat makes us different is we are a very by the book type of company. So there are certain codes, there are certain regulations that you have to follow, and we believe in upholding everything that we are asked to do. And there has also been opportunities on the sales side where we have lost jobs or lost opportunities because, you know, we wanted to follow regulations and follow codes, and perhaps the customer was looking for a shortcut. So I know that's more of a side note, but that is incredibly important to us. It's part of our key values. But we do really training, CTEP training, HMOSHA training, you name it. We have a very aggressive training schedule, and it depends again on what the expectations are for the employee. Are they going to be working in the yard, or are they going to be driving one of these large transports that you see on the road?
Yeah,
so
sure.
There is a different series of training, but we have built, and I should say Dave and his team, a very solid internal curriculum that they need to go through. The other benefit that we have is we are incredibly actively involved with local fire departments. And not only are we training our own employees, we also believe and execute on this with training the fire departments in the areas that we serve on how to handle propane. So
Wow.
as you can imagine, it's there can be issues, there can be challenges, and to have firemen understand if there is, how do they react and what do they need to do. So that's something we've been very involved in with many, many years. And again, back to our director of safety, he really has done an excellent job spearheading that.
Well, that's fantastic. How about from a non-technical standpoint? So, I mean, obviously you have back office and admin staff and that kind of thing. Do you do training for, like management training and, other, type of business training for folks that are don't have to follow, the safety protocols and environmental protocols?
And what we do even for the let's call it the non-frontline employees, we do put them through training on propane and propane safety, because oftentimes they are directly interacting with the customer, so they need to understand the product and understand what is occurring. So we are continuing to develop and have our training program internally evolve. This last year, we've done I think a very good job working on our management training and getting that team together. We do I'll call it our annual kickoff, where we bring a group of all of our, let's call it a management team, which is over 50 individuals that come into one place, and we do some sort of training and development. But we're continuing to build and expand on that. The other thing, and this has been very important to our SMAC group, is those bi-weekly calls that I mentioned always have a training component. And that training component, it has to focus, can be anything, but it has to focus on how does it make the individual better professionally and personally. So we've been
Where do you get those? Where do you get those ideas? Does somebody on your team bring that? So you rotate that, or does it always come from you, or what does that look like?
Now we're rotating it. So previously it would come directly from me. I got a lot of the wonderful concepts from Vistage, took those concepts and leveraged them into our meetings. But what I'm seeing now with this rotation, my group loves to read, or they listen to books on Audible. They're always bringing new concepts and new things that are important. So the last one that we had was, we talked about being in the moment, right? And when you think about work, so, well, that's not necessarily when you train on, but it is. How are we in the moment when we're having a Zoom call? How are we in a moment when we're working on this project? How are we more in the moment even when we're home? And starting to work on that and think through it and think really what it means. So those are some of the concepts that we've done when it comes to training.
Wow, what a great, I'm going to steal that one too. That's a great idea. I like that the fact that you're rotating it. And something that we're doing at Tarrytech too, we're calling them TED Talks, right? So we're going to start doing TED Talks, and we meet weekly and we go over, I mean, there's things that we need to go over.
Yes.
But we're going to try and replace some of those weekly meetings with TED Talks. So whatever that is, whether it's professional development or personal development, or whether you're talking about health or finance or whatever it is. So we're going to try and do that. But on a mini scale, I think you have a great idea with the weekly tip, or, you know, in your meetings. It could be something small, you know, 90 seconds, whatever it is, a quick video or something. So great idea. I'm going to steal that one too. So this is self-serving, this interview. Quite good.
Jamie, I'll give you one more. The
Sure.
other thing that we did is, because of COVID, and my team, my direct team, they're all over the Northeast. So we're not all within the corporate office. We started a text chain, right? That is just for our direct team. And we'll contribute, some people will contribute with quotes, so they'll contribute with a book that they just read, or maybe a song that inspired them, right? To get them like up and revved up and ready for work. And so there is constant communication on this text chain, usually early in the morning. We're an early morning crew, so it's usually going on before even 7. But it kind of, it's just, it's, you know you're there, you know your team's there, and just with some insightful things that can be beneficial that they can use as takeaways.
Great idea. We do that internally too at Tarrytech. We have we use Slack for our communication.
Yeah.
We have a channel that's, you know, just kind of fun stuff like that.
Perfect.
So a little bit different, but similar. So
yes, for sure.
So moving on, that was certainly better. That was a lot better. How about faster? Something that you've done internally or externally in your company, that whether it's sales or delivery of your product or communication, something that you've done that has made your company faster.
Yeah, so I'm going to actually go back to our roots a bit, because we were started and and we're a very entrepreneurial company. That has
You started what? Say that again.
As a very entrepreneurial company, we still have that entrepreneurial spirit that's part of our organization as a whole. So we're able to work faster because there's not all these additional layers that people need to go through, right? So we've always believed in empowering our teams to make decisions quickly, and being able to quickly pivot when something comes up. You know, as you can imagine, within our industry, and we've seen all different scenarios: cold winters, warm winters, the polar vortex, right? Power outages. We've even had some social media issues. You can name it, right? And you need to move to that all hands on deck, and that blocking and tackling. And so for us, I do see us as an organization that is able to move quickly, to do things faster, because we have that kind of muscle memory, able to pivot. So that's helped us tremendously.
I love your perspective, and I think that you realize, you know, what you can do because you're entrepreneurial and you started from a smaller organization. Early on in my career, I worked for General Motors, you know, right out of college, you know, working as an engineer for General Motors. And it was great. It was a tremendous experience, and I did all kinds of great things working for them. But the one thing that drove me nuts, and I guess I didn't realize it at the time, you know, because I was working for this massive, you know, international company, to do anything required, you know, 26 sign-offs and meetings and meetings about meetings and agendas, and you know, so it was very slow, and it's a, you know, polar opposite, you know, type of industry. So it's interesting that you recognize that in your own company, and obviously serves you well. And you know, we do the same thing at Tarrytech too, in regards to, you know, making decisions and trying to empower your team. And I could probably do a better job of this, but I always say, just make a decision, do it. I'm never going to second guess, you know, the decision that you made, unless it was something that was really obvious, you know, a bad decision. But do something. As long as you're trying to move forward, do something right by the client, fix the problem. You don't have to involve everyone. You can make the decision, you can do it, then tell us about it later, you know, and how you got through it. So, and it does make a big difference.
For sure. And letting your teams know it's okay sometimes to make mistakes, and
Sure.
allowing that environment, I think, is important. I think when it becomes so challenging is people don't want to make decisions when they're so worried about making the right one. So, and as you mentioned, yes, there has to sometimes be follow-ups and conversations and review of those decisions, but it's better to make a decision than not make one at all, right? And we know the price of sometimes just not making a decision and letting things go on. So that, you know, our ability to pivot, as I mentioned, has been incredibly helpful to our organization.
Yeah, that's a hallmark of a good leader too, you know, and all the books and volumes on leadership, you know, you have to be decisive. You have to make a decision. And if you can put that down to all levels of your organization, that's important. So, and
Absolutely.
even in the tech space too, and I think you said something, you know, people are afraid to make mistakes, and they need to know that not everybody, and certainly in the tech space, it's very important to us. There's no way you're ever going to know everything. It's impossible. And it's expected that you're going to say, I don't know. And that's a perfectly acceptable answer. And it's okay, like you said, you know, to make some mistakes. It's okay. You know, you got to be careful. You got to make sure that you back, like in my space, you got to make sure that you can always back out of it. You always back it up. You always let the user know. You can't really ever create, you know, down situations or expose the client in that respect. But if you're doing something to solve a problem and move forward and you make some mistakes, it's part of the business. I think it's part of life. I think it's part of, it's really almost an art form, right? There's no exact answer. There's no right or wrong. And you kind of figure it out as you go, and doing that in your business over time creates that confidence, and you end up making better decisions and you move forward faster.
Absolutely.
Moving on to the last segment here. What have you done that has made your company stronger?
So when I think of strength, I think of more of, you know, the mental outlook on certain things. So let me dive into that a little bit deeper. So as I mentioned, you know, any business will go through different cycles, right? Different challenges. And I think what has truly given us strength as an organization is to be able to look at the silver lining of every and any negative situation, right? And again, and maybe it ties back to our culture, but you know, personally, I've always believed that there is a silver, no matter how bad something is, how bad tragic something is, there is a silver lining. And there is something that you can learn from this incident, this issue, this problem that is going to make you or make the company stronger overall. And, you know, we've had our series of challenges like any other organization, but I think when it comes down to it, we've always been able to huddle up. And again, as my father would say, look ourselves in the mirror and have a very honest conversation. You know,
Which isn't always easy to do. That's not
which
always
is
easy to
not
do, right?
easy to always do, you know, and be able to say, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what could have I done differently, right? So, you know, I think that goes back to our strength because, you know, I even look at COVID, right? I mean, COVID is a very tragic situation that we're all in right now, and it is it's uncomfortable, it is scary, it's all the adjectives you can think of, right? But I also then continue to think about how has our business had to change as a result of COVID? You know, what have we had to do? And looking at some of those policy changes and processy changes are when we go back to now this new normal, whenever that happens and whatever that potentially looks like, there are going to be improved processes and things that we do that better this company, period. You know, you even look at, and I think a lot of organizations are seeing this now, the work from home, right? Many of us who are now, who are not, you know, frontline employees have the ability to potentially work from home. And does that change other companies' philosophy on work-life balance and ability to telecommute? So it's intriguing to think about it, but I do think as again, tragic as this pandemic is, we will as an organization continue to look at what are the positives that have come out of this and how we've handled it as a company and really look at that and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, obviously your company, excuse me, has been in business since 1968. So you've seen whatever, you know, COVID has been. I mean, this has probably happened, you know, several times in the history of your company. And if
Yes.
you don't take that approach and you don't have that attitude and you retreated every single time that happened, I'm certain that you would be in a much different space. You wouldn't be anywhere near as successful as you are today. We take a similar approach at Tarrytech too, and I don't know that we do it as well as you guys, and I'm sure that you're excellent at that. You know, but the silver lining of COVID, we looked at it and we went. In the beginning, we were calling our survival mode, right? And
Yep.
I think we moved through that quickly. And it wasn't just for us, but it was our clients too, helping our clients survive. And I'm sure you did the same thing for you too. because, you know, I'm sure a lot of your process procedures, the delivery, who's going to be there, oh my gosh, are we going to get access to the building, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So in the bars and the restaurants and homeowners and how you going to, so you had to go into a bit of a survival mode, right? But
Yes.
you have to look, you know, beyond that. As a business owner, you have to look beyond that. And we wanted to move in what we called our thrive mode. So at the end of this, how are we going to come out? How are we going to thrive during it, and how are we going to thrive afterwards? So some of the things that you mentioned, we looked at all of our internal processes and systems, and some of the products that we're using in the delivery, and we really used, you know, the months of April through, you know, even now, to look at the way that we are doing business and find the better company within Tarrytech, so that, you know, as we're starting to emerge from this, we're going to be in a much better spot. We did our company annual, we shared the business plan with, you know, the team today, and we're talking about where we were in January of 2020 versus where we are in January of 2021, in the amount of changes that we made over the course of the year. Wow, what a difference in the company that we are today. And I don't want to take the focus off of Paraco because it was your example, but I think that, you know, that is a similarity between our companies. We're taking something that isn't great, and we're doing what we can and trying to figure out how we make it awesome, and how we thrive, you know, at the other end of these unfortunate situations.
Yeah, I love that suggestion or that exercise that you've gone through with your organization. And I think it's maybe something I may steal from you, to pause and to now look at this January and say, wow, let's look at what's actually changed between now and last year. Because we're still, you know, in a kind of in that momentum, but I think it would be beneficial for us to do something similar to what you're doing and just pause and say, okay, what has changed, and look at all the new processes that have gone in. So that's wonderful that your organization is doing that, and I'm going to take that one.
Yeah, there you go. You can have it.
Perfect.
I
Thank
think you're
you.
still beating me. I think I've gotten more than but this was about you and Paraco. So, well, listen, thank you for the tips on better, faster, and stronger. One last question I like to ask, you know, before we end the interview. You know, if you could go back to Christina, you know, either when you're first starting your career, or, you know, when you're first starting your career at Paraco, or at any point, if there's a piece of information or something you wish that you knew, whether it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago, what would that piece of information be to your younger self?
Yep. It would be, you need to find something that you're passionate about. And, you know, I can't remember the exact words that my grandfather would say to me over and over again, but it's something along the lines, I'm sure you've heard it, you know, if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life,
Yeah.
right? And for me, you know, my early career prior to Paraco, listen, there were certain jobs I loved, there were certain ones that they weren't necessarily a great fit. And, you know, early in your career, you're going to experience that, right? And it's not a negative, it's just part of the growth process overall. But I am a big believer in, life is way too short to do something that you do not love. And I think going back to COVID and the pandemic, I think that's opened up a lot of people's eyes. So, you know, find something you love to do, find something you feel like you are growing both personally and professionally from, and that'll be the best fit. So that would be my advice, and what I've somewhat tried to live by throughout my career, and it's served me well.
Thank you for sharing that. I just want to offer a different perspective on that. And you have kids, I know, and they're younger, and I have kids and they're a little bit older. My oldest is a sophomore in college, so, you know, we're having conversations about, you know, what do you want to do? And, you know, he's my son, he's 20 years old. So how big is his view of the world, and he's trying to find that passion, right? Because I believe in that too. Find something that you really love. So there's a book out there, and it's called, and this might be good for your kids, it's called So Good They Can't Ignore You. I forget the author, but I can find it for you.
Right.
But if you don't know what your passion is, it was pretty funny. He interviewed, I think he was Canadian. He interviewed, you know, it was a prestigious university in Canada. I don't recall which one it was, but he interviewed these, you know, very successful, you know, students, right, in this prestigious university, and said, what is your passion? And this was so funny. It came back, I don't remember what the percentages were, but like, let's say 90% of them fell into one of two categories. hockey or swimming. You know, so, I mean, point being that you can't build a career, you know, on something that they're going to say is their passion. So anyways, his perspective is that, you know, if you're young and you don't know, or even if you're older and you don't know, find something that you enjoy, find a discipline that
Yes.
resonates with you, something like that, and then be the best in it. And it's funny because I just read a book by Robert Herjavec too. His book is called Driven. No, I take that back. I was actually watching Shark Tank, and he made mention of it. It was the guy that owns the Knicks. What's his name? The one that's on.
Not Cuban. No.
Mark Cuban.
Mark Cuban. Yes.
Anyways, his perspective was he was talking to one of the entrepreneurs, and they said it was very young, and she had started this company, and said, "What's your background?" And she said that I was, you know, rose to be X in a very large company in a very short period of time, and he recognized that as well, and he said, I congratulate you on that you rose to that level, because whatever you pick, you have to be the best at it. And in doing so, it opens up all the opportunities and helps you find your passion. So I think if you don't know what your passion is, and clearly you have, and you've been successful at it, you know, for people that are out there that are looking for some of that motivation, you know, find whatever discipline resonates with you and be so good at it that they can't ignore you. And I think it'll help you find that passion. So just a different spin on it. And I think it's good for, you know, younger listeners.
Oh, I love that. Well said.
So, well, listen, thank you so much for joining me and sharing all this wonderful information. And be sure to check out our other podcasts on www.bfsmetro.com, and have a great day.
Jamie, thanks for having me. This was wonderful.
My pleasure.